Hi guys, I'm gonna continue reading. Where did I stop? Page 269. Lord Palmerston fell and was succeeded by Lord Derby. Where does Disraeli, Lord Beaconsfield, come into the scheme? We know him as the author of many novels that, while not being evidential, serve to show the knowledge of their author on subjects of international significance. He knew how things were done, and, like a naughty boy, told tales out of school. Young Italy, Young Ireland, lastly Young England, with Disraeli as its founder. What do we really know of Young England beyond what the Primrose League would have us think? We know that Disraeli was always in debt, always short of money, and we know that people under such conditions are seldom their own masters. Who were his masters? Disraeli's father, Isaac Disraeli, was offered the leadership of their sect by the Jews of London. He refused. Was it also offered to his son? Writing of Lord Beaconsfield, AAB passes a casual remark in the London Evening Standard of Monday, October 29, 1928. The name of the heroine of Lothair, the work of his Meridian, is that of his wife, Mary Ann, ruled the underworld of secret societies. Are we to search there for the invisible masters? A further light is thrown upon the epoch of English history by no less than an authority than the Encyclopaedia Britannica, 9th edition. In an article on Prince Metternich, it says, Metternich, in one of his most earnest writings, places side by side, as instances of evil sought for its own sake, the action of the secret societies in Germany, the Carbonaria of Italy, and the attempts of the English to carry the Reform Bill. We do know that the Reform Bill was one of Disraeli's victories. Again, one wonders at Metternich. That great reactionary might well have disliked the Reform Bill, but this remark does not just indicate dislike. It is a positive indictment when read with the knowledge available to the historians of today. Therein lies the singular coincidence of facts. On the one hand, we have one of two statesmen, Metternich, decrying the English Reform Bill, and on the other, Disraeli getting it passed in the English Parliament. Yet both men, ever impecunious, were ruled by money coming from the same source, namely the Rothschilds, who, in Austria as well as in London, were actively becoming the masters of the national finances of both countries. In 1862, the First International came into being, and the part played in it by such Freemasons as Karl Marx, Tolaine, Fribourg, Varlin, Camelinat, Besley, Malon, and Corban is well known. But to return to the program of Young Italy, the Piedmontese were not quite satisfied with the results of this hasty treaty of Villafranca, 1859, but the revolutionaries had attained their object as far as Tuscany, the duchies of Parma and Modena, and the pontifical states were concerned, though they did not dare to dispossess the Pope without some preliminary political maneuvers. The revolution in the kingdom of the Two Sicilies had fallen again, but it was soon to succeed. By the way of retaliation, the International Committee of London began a propaganda in Lombardy among the students in the colleges, as a result of which the University of Pavia was forced to close. The movement, which started in December, was the precursor of the coming war. Lord Palmerston's plan was in the process of realization. To Francesco Crispi, a tool of Lemmi, was now assigned the task in which he and Bentivoglio had failed. He was in London when the news of the death by poison of Ferdinand II reached the International Masonic Committee. Mazzini's tool in the poison plot was Monsignor Caputo, a priest who had succeeded in winning the confidence of the king as his confessor. He was a Freemason and a sublime maître parfait, belonging to one of the most evil branches of the sect. The poison was administered in a slice of melon, and the king died in agony on May 22, 1857. Freemasonry had won, for Francis II, who now succeeded his father, was too young and inexperienced to be able to cope with any serious political situation alone. At this period, the states of Tuscany, Parma, and Modena were trying to form a coalition, but Dr. Farini, a Freemason, had become dictator and dictated regardless of popular sentiment. Lemmi was continually running back and forth from England with instructions from the London Committee to the local revolutionary chiefs, and in his secret capacity was very active through the different assemblies where the votes of the sold or terrorized members went for annexation to Piedmont, regardless of the wishes of the majorities in their constituencies. Traveling under the assumed names of Emmanuel Parida and Toby Glivan, Crispy spent much of his time during the next 2 years in Sicily as an agitator fomenting trouble. The great uprising was planned for October 12th, but though Lemmi was there to help, their combined efforts on that date were futile. Still they perished, and by propaganda and underground work, they persisted. Still they persisted, and by propaganda and underground work, they prepared for the great event 1860, when Garibaldi, Grand Master ad vitam of ancient and accepted Scottish rites, at Palermo, landed at Marsala with his famous 1,000 on the 11th May. He found everything ready. His expedition would, however, have failed had it not been for the Piemontese gold which bought the chief functionaries of the King of Naples, one of whose ministers, Liborio Romano, was chief of Sicilian Masonry and presided at the Scottish consistory at Naples. Francis's friend and confidant, General Nunziante, Duke of Mignano, was bought by Cavour for 4 millions. Organized at Genoa by Dr. Bertani, this supposedly spontaneous act of the famous general, which the government of Victor Emmanuel publicly disavowed, was organized by Cavour, who furnished the money by drafts on Mr. Bombrini, director of the bank, as proof by a letter written by the king himself to the American Commodore William de Rohan. June 27, 1860. Commander, I enclose herewith Medicis, one of Garibaldi's generals, 2 letters which you will put into other envelopes and give to Cavour. I have already given 3 millions to Bertani. Return immediately to Palermo to tell Garibaldi that I will send him Valerio instead of La Farina, and that he is to advance at once on Messina, as Francesco, the King of Naples, is on the point of giving the Neapolitans a constitution. Your friend, Victor Emmanuel. This letter, which was published in Rome in 1881 by the son of Victor Emmanuel in the Fanfulla with an article by Commodore William de Rohan, was never challenged. Margiotta then adds, there is little more to be said concerning the connivance of Cavour and Garibaldi. Victor Emmanuel did nothing against his wish, as the official newspapers allege, for everything that happened in 1860 was settled in advance. It was necessary to save appearances and to deceive Russian and Austrian diplomacy, which was not in the secret, so that was Cavour's reason for allowing Garibaldi to play the part of an undisciplined revolutionary, taking on himself alone the responsibility of his adventures. The policies of the Grand Master Cavour and the Grand Master Mazzini, each representing 2 different Masonic currents emanating from different sources, met on the issue of the destruction of the papacy, which it was hoped to submerge through the unification of Italy. Cavour aimed at unity in the form of a constitutional monarchy under the House of Savoy, and Mazzini, aiming at a republic, found himself forced into a compromise which obliged him to accept, temporarily at least, a Piemontese monarchy for united Italy. The captain of Freemasonry was Garibaldi, the tool of Palmerston, Cavour, and Mazzini. While working thus together and helping one another, Mazzini and Cavour each followed an occult personal and distinct line of action, the secrets of which they did not share. Each in his mysterious work had his chief agent, the man he trusted. The chief agents of Cavour were his Jewish secretary Isaac Artam and Carletti, and the chief agents of Mazzini were his Jewish secretaries Wolf, Lemmi, and Lauper. After the fight of the Grand Duke of Tuscany, Lemmi went to Florence, where, to better mask his play, he became a banker. His patrons Mazzini and Kossuth were never in want of money furnished either by England or Masonry. He made money practicing usury as a good Jew, charging it is up to 200 and 300%, but in politics he continued as a valuable auxiliary to Mazzini. Garibaldi and Mazzini wished to push on to Rome, but Victor Emmanuel thought it more prudent to leave well enough alone for the time being, and the Piedmontese government finally overruled the revolutionaries. Mazzini and Crispi were even asked to leave Naples by the authorities, though Lemmi was not molested. Cavour knew him to be a secret agent of Mazzini, and had him watched and his record investigated, but though he did not trouble himself much about him, he wanted to insure himself against all anti-monarchist action on his part. During this inquiry, he came across the records of Lemmi's youthful exploits at Marseille, and in 1844, so he asked the government of Napoleon III for an official copy of this document, which lay in the archives of the Ministry of the Interior of the Italian government for 31 years, and proved a powerful weapon in the hands of Victor Emmanuel and Humbert I. Chafing under the menace of the existence of this document, however, Lemmi induced Crispi in 1893 to arrange for its disappearance, but this move was forestalled by an implacable enemy of Lemmi who succeeded in getting possession of the famous paper. In 1867, Lemmi entered into negotiations with the Freemason Graf von Bismarck, and the first projects of alliance between Prussia and Italy date thenceforth. Lemmi hated France as much as did Mazzini, so it is not surprising to find them both intriguing with Bismarck to bring about a Franco-Italian estrangement. Napoleon III, by the Convention of September 15, 1864, had established Rome and its surrounding territory as distinct from the Kingdom of Italy, so that till 1870 the Church still retained this last fragment of its temporal possessions. But towards 1865, Mazzini organized an association for Italian unity, the object of which was the union of these states with the rest of Italy, with Rome for the capital, according to Garibaldi's program. Mazzini, however, was afraid to go to Rome without the consent of France, thinking that the destruction of the temporal power of the Pope in the face of the French opposition could only be obtained by means of a revolution. No one is ignorant of the negotiations between France, Austria, and Italy in 1867, fruitless because of Napoleon's refusal to accede to the proposal of the Austrian minister de Boist to allow United Italy freedom to march on Rome. France, subsequently abandoned by Italy, met her fate at Sedan in 1870, and Bismarck used Mazzini and Italian Freemasonry to break the Franco-Italian alliance and to force Victor Emmanuel to take Rome in spite of the wishes of the French people. When the Franco-Prussian War broke out in 1870, the time for revolution was ripe. In July, shortly after the declaration of hostilities, the Italian revolutionaries held a mass meeting in the theater at Milan, organized by the most notorious and dreaded agitators in Italy. After this public meeting, there was a secret political one attended by 15 high masons. Those present, according to Oreste Cucci, who was told of it by Fabrizi himself, were Dr. Timoteo Riboli, Francesco Crispi, Colonel Cucci, Asprani, Bertani, Fabrizi, Frappoli, Caroli, Ratazzi, Seismit, Doda, Morelli, Cineo, Cosentini, Mancini, and General Raffaello Cadorna. The object of this conference was to determine the line of conduct to be adopted in the event of the defeat of Napoleon's army, and it was decided to send Cucci to Bismarck to obtain from the Prussian government the necessary arms to go to Rome should Victor Emmanuel persist in his attitude of vacillation. Cucci accomplished his mysterious mission, and Bismarck concluded a deal whereby Prussia was to furnish guns and money to the Italian revolutionaries, in return for which they were to keep up agitation to prevent an Italian alliance with the French nation. Everything was ready, still Victor Emmanuel hesitated. Public opinion was rapidly being manufactured with assistance of Bismarck's money, so the deputies of the left, who signed a petition for the occupation. Oh, I'm sorry, now I lost my space. Why does this have to happen? Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. Who signed a petition for the occupation of Rome, on being asked what they would do if the ministry refused their demand, answered, "We will make barricades, and with the people we will go to Rome without you." The government then decided to act, and General Cadorna, who had already been selected by Freemasonry to lead a popular army should the government not wish to send him there, in an official capacity, marched on Rome. The operations of war began on September 15, 1870, and on September 20th, at 5 o'clock in the morning, the cannon of Cadorna settled the Roman question. With Porta Pia was forced, the sacrifice was accomplished, Freemasonry had triumphed. But Freemasonry had won again when, according to Mr. George Daly, writing in February 1871, Mr. Gambetta, who was the arbitrary master of that country's, France, destiny, during the 3 months that his dictatorship lasted, was able, without anyone daring to oppose his conduct, to misuse his power in order to unsettle the country and satisfy his own ambitions. He trampled the country's laws underfoot by slighting the most elementary rules of civilized society, by hunting from their benches magistrates inamovibles, and from the council chambers those who had been elected by suffrage, by taking the war into his own hands, by promoting and depriving officers of their rank, by suddenly changing, according to his own whims and fancies, or those of his advisers, his opinions, schemes, and plans. Such indeed is the example given by all the demagogues who act in the name of the people. In the discussion concerning the fate of the fomenters of the Commune, Gambetta made one of his most eloquent speeches, the result of which was that a vote of amnesty was passed in their favor. In 1871, he further consolidated his power by issuing a decree declaring that the former servitors of the empire would be ineligible to membership in the National Assembly, which was convened to ratify the treaty with Prussia. By this time, Adriano Lemmi had attained prosperity and become the owner of the vast estates near Florence. Mazzini died on March 11, 1872, and at his request, Lemmi was appointed by Albert Pike to succeed him as chief of the Sovereign Executive Directory. In 1870, the Marquis of Ripon, who had succeeded the Earl of Zetland as Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of England, resigned his office and became a Roman Catholic. He was succeeded by the Prince of Wales, later to be Edward VII, King of England, received Knight Kadosh in 1882 and on January 28th, and Affilié Supérieur Grand Orient in 1883. Adriano Lemmi, a Palladist, though not yet a member of the Supreme Council of Rome, soon concluded that the secret superior authority conferred on him could be best enhanced in Italy by smashing the various supreme councils for the benefit of one. Unity of Italian Masonry was then his aim. Success in this project depended on slow, deliberate maneuvering, secrecy concerning his Palladist affiliation, temporary restriction of the number of triangles in the peninsula, and above all, forbearance in dealing with the rival powers established in the ordinary rites. In 1875, the scene of Masonic intrigue had shifted to England. The Khedive of Egypt, being at the time financially embarrassed, offered his shares in the Suez Canal Company for sale. The Duc de Sezes, French Minister of Foreign Affairs, failed to inform the French authorities of the Khedive's predicament, while the Rothschilds, on the information of their Egyptian agent Ambrose Sinadino, secretly advanced to Disraeli, then Prime Minister of England, the necessary funds to deliver the controlling interest of the canal to Britain, thus striking an international coup d'etat, the significance of which was only dimly appreciated when in the following year Disraeli had Queen Victoria proclaimed Empress of India. Thus the controlling interest of the great waterway to the east was vested in England to have and to hold till the British Empire about to be created should cease to serve the purpose of its makers. In June 1877, Adriano Lemmi became an ordinary member of the Grand Orient of Italy at Rome, of which Giuseppe Mazzini was Grand Master, keeping this affiliation secret until 1883, when he left it be known that he was joint Grand Master with Giuseppe Petroni. At this date, the rivalry of the supremacy in Scottish rights had become acute, for the Roman Grand Orient wished to dominate over the Supreme Council of Italy at Turin, of which Timoteo Riboli was Grand Master. The Grand Commander of the Roman Supreme Council was Senator Colonel George Tamaggio, though its real chief was Luigi Castellazzo. With the secret aid of the latter and the further assistance of Count Piancini, Tamaggio was indeed, my goodness, what is wrong with me? Tamaggio was induced to abdicate his rights for 50,000 francs, and on January 21st, 1885, the Supreme Council of Rome was absorbed by the Grand Orient of Italy. All Lemmi now required to complete his victory was to absorb the Supreme Council of Turin, but Riboli, the only real and legitimate representative of Italian Freemasonry, recognized by the Convention of Universal Scottish Rights at Lausanne in 1875, and by all the Masonic powers of the world, had no wish to part with a source of revenue or to defer to the little Jew at Rome who was invested with no recognized superior authority. Lemmi, who well knew that his secret title of Palladis Chief assured him eventual supremacy, addressed himself to the sovereign pontiff at Charleston, Albert Pike, to whom he explained the danger to Italian Masonry of such intense dissensions and the necessity for fusion in the great struggle against the Vatican, stating further that the authority of Rome, the capital of Italy since 1870, must be recognized by the foreign Masonic powers. His reasons appealed to the foreign pontiff of the Universal Freemasonry, who, in November 1886, entirely disarmed Riboli by promising him an indemnity of 30,000 francs. Riboli acquiesced, and the money was handed out from the central fund of the order. In the Supreme Administrative Director of Berlin, the payment of this sum is recorded in the balance sheet of 1887 under the heading of exceptional expenses in the following terms: suppression of the Supreme CONS, I'm not sure exactly what that means, maybe Constitution, of Italy sitting at Turin. Extraordinary indemnity allowed to FTR on the proposal of the FAL and approved by the Secret Committee of February 28, 30,000 francs. Before pocketing his 30,000 francs, Riboli raised a great row, abusing Lemmi and objecting to the fusion of the Supreme Council of Turin with that of Rome, ignoring the fact that in 1885 Tamaggio had received 50,000 francs for the same reason. He sent protests broadcast in the shape of the balustras, demonstrating the legality of the Supreme Council of Turin and the illegality of that of the Roman Center. Many Freemasons rallied to his assistance. A great movement was started to do away with the despotism of Lemmi, and numerous lodges were founded under the obedience of Turin. Lemmi, however, being chief of political action in High Masonry, had a great advantage over his opponents, but he could not make good his title before the lodges, 9/10 of whose members ignored the very existence of universal central Masonry, the secret of which was to be kept under penalty of death. On the other hand, this was solely a matter of concerning Scottish rights, for the protection of which the Supreme Council of Switzerland existed at the executive power of the Scottish Confederation. This council, a distinctly separate from the secret executive of Central High Masonry, whose one concern is international politics, so no confusion was possible. During a 9-month campaign, Lemmi opponents gained many adherents for Riboli, who, suddenly reversing his position, capitulated on the intervention of Albert Pike. 30,000 francs had done the trick. For the benefit of his dupes, Pike had deceitfully declared in the fundamental constitution of High Masonry that the constitution, statutes, and regulations of each rite would always be respected by Charleston in order to propitiate Lemmi, who tore up that rite of which Riboli believed him to be the patriarch and president. The Supreme Council of Lausanne was much embarrassed, inasmuch as, where Scottish rights was concerned, it was obliged to admit that Lemmi's opponents were in the right, and that as the Scottish rights Mason, he, as a patronus successor, the chief of political action of secret High Masonry, was a rebel. In an effort to beat the devil around the bush, Riboli and Tommaso, pretending to take Lemmi as their temporary delegate, accepted for themselves the empty honorary title of Sovereign Grand Commander ad vitam, while Lemmi became Sovereign Grand Commander delegate invested with the real power. Italian Freemasonry was united. A meeting was convened at Florence in January 1887 by Tommaso and Riboli, at which 7 brothers from Rome and 7 from Turin, under orders from Charleston, ratified this agreement. Lemmi misappropriated Masonic funds and profited by his position to exploit everyone, during which period of frenzied finance he pocketed over 400,000 francs. Many complaints of this conduct were sent to the Supreme Director at Charleston, but while passing through the hands of Phileas Walder, who shared in the loot, anything to Lemmi's discredit was suppressed, never reaching Pike, who trusted him till the end. It was in 1881 that Lemmi had embarked on this campaign for the de-Christianization of Italy, giving under his invaluable direction and organization to the scattered forces of anti-clericalism. Mazzini had made no mistake, for Lemmi persecuted the church with a savage hatred. During a Masonic Congress held at Milan in 1881, the following resolutions were adopted. 1. Measures are to be taken to counteract the work of the institutions known as Quever Pi's charitable works, which were founded by clericism to corrupt the people under the misnomer of charity. The morals of the country, thus endangered, need reforming as well as the laws. Women are henceforth to be eligible for Freemasonry, and feminine lodges are to be founded as soon as possible. 3. It is deemed necessary by the Congress to establish workmen's lodges in the city as well as in the country. These lodges to be free except for a nominal fee to cover unavoidable expenses. 4. It is decided to institute a corps of secret Masonic messengers whose mission is to transmit to all the lodges the orders and instructions of the chief. These messengers are to be chosen from among Masons, having no personal encumbrances and whose devotion to the order has been of long standing. They are to be registered at no particular lodge, deriving their powers directly from the central authority of Italian Masonry. 5. A corps of brother propagandists, themselves unknown as Masons, is to be created. They are to travel from town to town as peddlers and merchants of all kinds, spreading everywhere, notably among the rural populations, opinions favorable to Masonry. In the course of their peregrinations, they are to be, oh my gosh, this is written so terrible. In the course of their peregrinations, they are to abstain from visiting local Masonic lodges and are to be known as traveling brothers. 6. Should the order wish to initiate a personage of very high social rank, or one who, in the opinion of the Grand Master, should happen to be in a position demanding the strictest secrecy, the initiation need be known only to the Assistant Grand Master or the Grand Secretary and the Grand Treasurer. 7. The Congress declares the solution of the social questions and the winning for the legitimate workers of their rights to be its chief concern. The lodges are authorized to hold debates on the most practical means of obtaining governmental support for all measures tending to abolish pauperism and the improvement of the lot of the working classes. This, the 7th resolution of the Congress, to be made public. 8. The liberal forces of Italy are to be secretly organized, and the lodges are to act in such a way as to gain for Freemasonry a majority of the national representation in Parliament. The Congress adopts for Italy the rule passed by the Grand Orient of France in 1848 under the title Masonic Rules to be followed with regard to elections. 9. The Congress declares the chief object of the efforts of the Italian Freemasonry to be, for the present, to obtain from the government a. The regulation of the ecclesiastical patrimony, the property of which belongs to the state and the administration of which belongs to the civil powers. B. The strenuous application of all existing laws, guaranteeing to the civil society its independence with regard to clerical influence. C. The enforcement of existing laws by virtue of which religious congregations are to be suppressed, and the suggestion of measures calculated to prevent these laws from being evaded. D. The promulgation of the law relating to the property of religious bodies, confiscation. E. The suppression of all religious instruction in the schools. J. The creation of schools for young girls where the pupils can be protected from any kind of clerical influence. 10. Finally, the Congress decided to create a Masonic initiative, one great, politically nonpartisan, anti-clerical party whose object would be to fight and destroy clericalism by any and all means. Adriano Lemmi promptly obeyed Pike's orders and the resolutions of the Congress, which he himself had dictated, by establishing in Rome on July 13, 1881, 10 anti-clerical auxiliary lodges, the foundation expenses of which were paid by the Supreme Directory of Rome. By his order, similar lodges were founded in almost every important town of the peninsula. Lemmi is a Satanist, and he organized the anti-clerical movement as a Satanist. Besides his effort to destroy the church, he had a movement to spread, the nature cult, well knowing that the secret protection of the sect would always be afforded him in the event of the anti-Catholic government of Italy being withdrawn. This sect does not as yet dare to reveal its supreme aim, as, say the chiefs, the world is not yet ready to receive enlightenment by the true light. The reader must remember that at the date when the above was written by Margiata, Lemmi was still alive. So Lemmi first preached Lucifer and then fought Christianity by combating the idea of the supernatural. All his discourses and manifests were composed either by Iulius Bacchi, an atheist, or Umberto dal Medico, a Luciferian. His instructions to the Italian anti-clericals were also put into operation by the Freemasons of other countries, for the supreme object of the sect is the suppression, by a terrible social upheaval, of the religion of God, and its substitution by that of Satan, known to the dupes of Masonry as the great architect of the universe. On November 21, 1888, Lemmi wrote Pike a letter appealing for help in his fight against the Vatican. The letter closed with the following paragraph: "Help us in our struggle against the Vatican, thou whose authority is supreme, and under thy impulse all the lodges of Europe and America will rally to our cause." Pike needed little urging and immediately fell in with Lemmi's plans. On March 30, 1889, the Mother Lodge, Archimede, took the initiative in an effort to shake off Lemmi's tyrannical yoke by announcing the formation of the Masonic Federation of the Independent Lodges of Italy. Lemmi was much perturbed by this effort at secession, which he finally succeeded in crushing by the use of the power of gold. After the Federation had called a second Congress, he sent one of his secret agents to Palermo with 10,000 francs to buy off the Scelsi brothers. Discord was thus sown in the ranks of the Federation. Soon the disintegration was complete, the center of Palermo vanished, and the opposition was crushed. Towards this period, Lemmi got control of the Italian tobacco monopoly, through which he succeeded by swindling methods in acquiring several millions. The whole affair was aired in Parliament, but the intimidated deputies voted to save the reputation of the sect and in order to suppress the scandal. Although Colonel Achille Bizzoni, Depute Matteo Renato, Impriano Purio, and several newspapers took up the matter and made a great row, which ended in the usual way when public gets tired of the subject. As a result of Lemmi's politics in the elections of 1890, no decent, honest, and independent candidate for political position had a chance of being elected against one of his hand-picked nominees. Italian politics became a Freemasonic monopoly, and the people were mercilessly exploited by the dregs of society, backed by Lemmi and his money, much of which was extorted from the Banca Romana. On April 2, 1891, Albert Pike died and was succeeded in the Supreme Grand College of Masons by Albert George Mackey, who held the post for 2 years and 5 months. There were great rivalries between the members of Pike's staff, and Albert George Mackey was chosen as a compromise candidate who was unlikely to interfere seriously with any of the others. With neither strength of character, energy, nor activity, he was no match for Lemmi, who aspired the supreme Masonic power as well as to the handling of the Masonic central funds, for the expenditure of a large part of which no account was required by the Supreme Directory at Berlin. The international organization was now a formidable machine composed of 77 triangular provinces, the archdiocese of a high masonry, and 33 Lotus Mother lodges, the founder lodges and generators of palladism. With Filius Walder as accomplice, Lemmi lost no time in starting to undermine the power of Charleston, but to realize this project it was first necessary to create a movement in the triangular provinces. To this end, he employed his secret political agents of the Executive Directory of Rome, practically all of whom were Jews. These agents were registered in the Central Directory only by a number and a special Masonic name, and were unknown even to the Grand Masters of the provincial lodges, as well as to the brothers and sisters at the head of the Lotus Mother Lodge. His particular agent in London in 1893 was supposed to be an old Piccadilly Jew called Daniel Mould. The came under which he was, it says the came, it's actually supposed to be the name. The name under which he was registered for this triangular province in the Grand Central Directory of Naples was Adam Katzmoon. A magical value of the letters of which, then added, give the total of 244, exactly as do the letters of his real name. Lemmi was not forced to rely solely upon his special agents, for he also had the unanimous support of the powerful secret Jewish lodges. By the decree of September 12, 1874, which confirmed a treaty signed by Armand Levy for the Jewish B'nai B'rith, Brothers of the Alliance of America, Germany, and England, and the supreme authority of Charleston, Albert Pike authorized the Jewish Freemasons to form a secret federation functioning side by side with the ordinary lodges. This secret society was to bear the title of Sovereign Patriarchal Council, and its universal center was to be at Hamburg, Valentinskampfstrasse. In subscriptions alone, it collected 1,400,000 francs a year, which were used for general Jewish propaganda. Under the terms of this document, given in full on page 225 of Adriano Lemmi by D. Margiata, Jewish Masonry, unlike Gentile Masonry, was not to be graded. Its members were exempt from belonging to any other official right, and the secret of its existence was to be most strictly kept by those members of High Masonry who had been informed by the Supreme Dogmatic Directory of its existence. The letter clause in the agreement is undoubtedly responsible for the equivocal attitude of High Masons, which with regard to the past and present, national and international, secret political activities of the B'nai B'rith, and in the interests of humanity, the conspiracy of secrecy should be revealed. For the control of the international balance of power and the possibilities of the international spy system thus established are a menace to the welfare and peace of the peoples of the world. A Jew of French descent, this Armand Levy, above referred to, had attached himself to the Napoleons at an early time and was employed by them in various ways. As a member of the International, he represented the possibilities of an imperial socialism, and when the barricades were built, his name was in the Commune, and his voice was raised for the extremist councils. It was who rose in the Hotel de Ville to ask that all the deputies of Paris should be summoned from Versailles, and if they would not come, should be deposed, convicted, and condemned to death. It was indeed in the heart of the Jewish lodges that the plans to manufacture public opinion necessary to the success of Lemmi's ambitious projects were made, and what actually happened was the result of a plot of the Sovereign Patriarchal Council of Hamburg against the Supreme Dogmatic Directory of Charleston. Hamburg won in the end, and the secret Jewish control of the powerful machine of international Masonry was assured. The Jewish lodges were Lemmi's willing tools, and 50,000 Masons, simultaneously Paladists and members of the Hamburg Federation, under orders given by the Jewish agents in the pay of the chief of the political action, made over a period of 3 months in the triangles and the secret Jewish lodges a splendid propaganda calculated to induce discussion and approval of the transfer of the Supreme Dogmatic Directory of Charleston to Rome. Everywhere, by every means, the agents of Lemmi worked indefatigably to create a demand for the removal of the headquarters of the order from Charleston to Rome, on the pretext that the power of the Vatican could be better fought at close quarters. These reclamations of a noisy minority were then magnified for the benefit of the Grand Council of Masons at Charleston into a threat of imminent secession, and after much maneuvering, Phileas Walder succeeded in inducing George Mackey and the American Masons to sign the decree convening the Sovereign Convention. Walder, having remarked that Lemmi was not to be a candidate for the Supreme Grand Mastership in case of the passage of a vote to transfer, of which he maintained there was no danger, seeing that the majority of the triangles favored Charleston as the seat of High Masonry. The American Masons, overconfident of the outcome of the convention, overlooked the importance of the choice of the town in which it was to meet. 1 second. On May 20th, 1893, after all the delegates had been elected, Lemmi suddenly launched his decree of chief organizer, appointing Rome as the convention city. Had everything been straight, Charleston would have come out of the trial of the secret convention with a majority of 52 votes, for only 25 provinces favored to move to Rome, but to Lemmi, all ways, including bribery and crime, were good. Excuse me for a second, I had to close the door to the washroom. On the eve of the opening of the convention, 14 of the delegates favoring Charleston were suddenly taken ill, and elections for substitute delegates were held in 5 of the Grand Triangles, but in the remaining 9, the provincial Grand Masters, owing to lack of time or some other reason, referred the matter by telegram to Charleston. George Mackey answered, "Send Bovio, proxy, to provide a European substitute." It was suicide. Bovio, Grand Master General of the Grand Central Directory of Naples, and his lieutenants were entirely devoted to Lemmi, in whom George Mackey continued blindly to confide. The 9 sudden illnesses of the American delegates, the only ones he knew of, had failed to open his eyes, and he continued counting 52 votes against the transfer. Apart from 2 or 3 American delegates, All those who landed in England in August and were entertained by the Mother Lodge of the Lotus of England in the secret temple at 32 Oxford Street, Frascati's, were oblivious of the imminent crisis. When the Grand Central Directory of Naples received these proxies, 9 Italian delegates were named to represent Cleveland, Memphis, Guatemala, Havana, Caracas, Lima, La Paz, Trieste, Ytres, and Port Louis, one of whom abstained from voting while the rest cynically voted against the wishes of the province they represented. The count of the ballots gave the following result: out of 77 delegates, 48 delegates for the transfer to Rome, 25 delegates against the transfer to Rome, 4 delegates not voting the transfer to Rome. After this essentially fraudulent transfer of the real Masonic power from Charleston to Rome, the rest was easy. The 10 Masons of Charleston retained their empty titles in an honorary capacity, while Lemmi, now self-styled sovereign pontiff, named 10 other active Masons, but owing to the difficulties attendant on the meetings of these widely dispersed magnates, he created a supreme triangle with 2 assistants, Carducci and Ferrari, the members of which are Patriarch Emeritus Mason, Germany, Findel, at Leipzig, Patriarch Emeritus Mason of India, Hobbes, at Calcutta, Patriarch Emeritus Mason Hungary, Antel de Beres, at Budapest, Patriarch Emeritus Mason Australia, W.J. Clark, at Melbourne, Patriarch Emeritus Mason England, David Sandeman, at London, Patriarch Emeritus Mason France, Floquet Tippereth, at Paris, Patriarch Emeritus Mason Egypt, Gerasimos Poggio, at Alexandria, Patriarch Emeritus Mason Spain Miguel Moreta, at Madrid. I'm going to leave that out. Chile B. Alamos Gonzalez, at Valparaiso. Belgium Goblet Del Vela. I'm sorry, I have to laugh. Who names their son Goblet? Okay, sorry. International Masonry under Lemmi becomes satanic and Jewish. International Jewry has much to explain. Lemmi died in 1896 and was succeeded by Ernesto Nathan, an English Jew who, in view of the intimacy which had existed between his mother, Sarah Nathan, and Mazzini, was said to have been the latter's natural son. Lemmi left a son called Silvano Lemmi. In 1895, a schismatic Masonic group calling itself the Grand Orient of Italy was founded. On March 5, 1899, it held a meeting at which it adopted a constitution of its own, after which Lemmi's Grand Orient and the new one settled down to a state of secret civil war. Secrecy was imperative, for prior to 1895, the row between the various Masonic factions had become so acute that the profane public had begun to get seriously interested in the political Masonic affairs of the contending factions. The outcome of this dispute was the exposures made in the following books. Okay, I'm not going to list them. They're all French. Well, you can look it up. It's on page 294. To inaugurate a policy of suppression, these revelations were shown to have been a hoax, a mystification. The maneuver was successful. On 19th of April, 1897, the author, writing under the pseudonym of Diana Vaughan, mysteriously disappeared, and Leo Taxil publicly repudiated his own allegations against Freemasonry. Once again, the public heard, believed, and forgot what happened to Palladism and the Super-Rite. At the foot of page 76 of Mrs. Nesta Webster's Secret Societies, we find the following note. Thus Hastings' Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics omits all reference to Satanism before 1880 and observes, the evidence of the existence of either Satanists or Palladists consists entirely of the writings of a group of men in Paris. It then proceeds to devote 5 columns out of the 6 and a half of which composed the article to describing the works of 2 notorious romancers, Leo Taxil and Bataille. There is not a word of real information to be found there. Indeed, we owe Mrs. Webster a debt of gratitude for thus drawing our attention to this curious effort in an otherwise presumably reliable work to eliminate certain phases of religious history. Those phases are the personal histories of Albert Pike, the great Freemason, and Giuseppe Mazzini, the great revolutionist. Oh, I'm sorry. I think there's something skipped here. It's weird. I'm sorry for the interruption. The photostats and documents were appended show the reorganization of the super right under the general name of Illuminism, linked, as we know, with Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia. Patents of the ancient order of Oriental Templars, then in its embryonic stages, 1902, are also shown. In 1917, this organization unobtrusively declared itself the super right. The history of the ancient order of Oriental Templars is given on a subsequent page. Okay, that was chapter 22. The next thing I'm going to read is chapter 33. Oh, that was chapter 32, yeah. And the next thing is chapter 33, the interlocking directorate. But I'm not going to read that today. So I'll see you next time. Goodbye.